What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another Pauper video. Today, we are going to be talking about a card that's actually been legal in the format for quite some time. However, it has recently been banned in a much more supported and, as much as I hate to say it, more popular format than Pauper. So we're going to be talking about what that ban actually means for our format and how that card can be played and why you should possibly play it now. Not only that, we're also going to be taking a look at a brand new brew that I have prepared for you, so definitely stick around to the end of the video for that. As always, guys, if you would like to support the channel, if you could put a like on this video and hit that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate the support. And with that said, let's take a look at the card we're talking about today. All right, and as you might have guessed, the card that we are talking about is a violent outburst. And as of recording this video, this card has been officially banned from the modern format. So before we get any further, let's take a look at what this card does. So it costs one generic mana, a red and a green. It is an instant and it has Cascade, which means when you play the spell, remove cards from the top of your library until you remove a non-land card that costs less. You may then play that card without paying its mana cost and put the revealed cards on the bottom in a random order. And then creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Now, this card was a very powerful in Modern. It was kind of busted from what I understand. I am not a Modern player at all. I pretty much exclusively play Pauper, which in my mind is really the only MTG format worth playing. But anyhow, this card has been legal for a while, but because it's been so popular in the overall metagame of Modern, it skyrocketed in price, bringing it to the same level as, say, cards like Dust to Dust or Snuff Out, for example, or some of the more expensive cards in the format. I think this card was over $6 a piece for a while, which is a pretty high price for a common. And so it's definitely been a card that I think I know for myself haven't really wanted to brew with, even though I have been interested in it. But just because of the price, especially when you're looking at building a home brew, you don't really know whether it's going to be good or not. Definitely, if you're going to invest money in a deck, you probably want to do something a little more tried and true than, just some homebrew that you've put together. But now this card is banned. So that means that the price is going to go down. So that means brewing with it is now back on the table. And I think this card actually has a lot of potential. I have seen some other Cascade decks, obviously Gruul Panza, as well as just Jund or just regular Gruul Cascade or Red Green Cascade that play. They mostly are trying to hit really big creatures, so to do a lot of ramp and play really big things like an annoyed Altasar, for example, is a one of the main spells that they are trying to hit. Obviously, Monstertron also does a lot of cascading as well, so, but this card wouldn't are not going to be able to hit any of those big payouts like this. So the way you would play this, at least in Pauper, in my mind, is going to be, trying to go as wide as possible with tons of small creatures. Kind of similar to White Weenie's plan, very grindy, just building up your board until you just go wide with one huge attack and take your opponent out. And this card could definitely do something like that. So it is definitely a very powerful card. Cascade is just a very good ability. Definitely has been proven to be one. You don't really see Wizards of the Coast printing a lot of new cards that have Cascade with just how powerful this ability is. And also the fact that this is an instant just means this card is insanely good. And I'm honestly surprised we haven't seen it much in Pauper lately, but I think in terms of the Cascade decks, like I've said, they've kind of pivoted more towards, big stuff and ramping. Uh, in order to play lots of, I think it's Avenging Hunter is one of the big payoffs as well, to try and get that out for free and take the initiative, which, playing, if you can play with the initiative in this format, it is definitely something that can really steamroll your opponents. So, but this card isn't going to be able to hit an Avenging Hunter, and I don't think in a deck that's centered around it, that's going to be one of your targets. I think you're just trying to overwhelm your opponents with tons and tons of creatures and go as fast and as hard as possible. So yeah, I think this card has great amount of potential for the format. I'm personally really excited about brewing with it, especially now. Last I checked, I think this card is going for less than $2 now, so it is dropped in price significantly, making building a homebrew around it a lot more financially viable. And here's the list that I put together. So pretty much going with what I was kind of describing earlier, that we are just trying to go wide with a bunch of creatures and really take full advantage of the card that we were talking about. So in our creature pile, I got 3 copies of Goblin Bushwhacker. So hitting this through Cascade would be really, really great, especially if we just have one red available. We can then double up on our global buffs for our creatures with a violent outburst, so that this would be pretty fun. Then I got 4 copies of Wild Cantor. This can help fix our mana, is also just being a great uh, turn one play for the deck. Then I also got 4 copies of Burning Tree Emissary, and this card really helps us chain a lot of spells. I've also been thinking about maybe bringing in 1 copy of Scattershot in the deck. I haven't really committed to that idea yet, so it's not in the list currently. But yeah, Burning Tree Emissary really helps us get a lot of power on the board very quickly. Then we got 4 copies of Jund Hackblade, 4 copies of Naya Hushblade, 4 Rip Clan Crashers, and 4 Valley Dashers. So for the most part, almost all of our creatures have haste. So the Valley Dashers, Rip Clan Crashers, and the Jund Hackblades, as long as we have a multicolored creature, which basically all our creatures outside of the Goblin Bushwhacker and the Valley Dashers are multicolored. So most of the time, Jund Hackblade will be a 3/2 haste. So yeah, so going hard and fast, like we said. All right, and then we got 4 copies of Lightning Bolt. So this is, I think I would probably mainly use this as a piece of removal just to make sure we're getting damage through with all of our creatures and they are not dying to chump blockers. And then 4 copies of Mana Morpho. So this really helps us sling a lot of spells and hopefully find the thing that we need. Is also, it basically replace itself in terms of both card and resources that we spent. So Manamorphose definitely seems a very, very good for the deck. And then 4 copies of Violent Outburst. And then in our enchantment pile, I just got 4 copies of Rancor, as this really helps us get more damage through, and it's something we can keep playing and playing as long as it doesn't get exiled or our creature gets removed while we have it on the stack. And that is like probably the only 2 ways you can truly remove Rancor, because it always comes back to your hand as long as it's on the battlefield. All right, and then in our mana base, I'm on a 17 land build for this list. So we got 5 forests, 1 forgotten cave, just in case we start flooding out. I usually like to put in at least one cycling land in most of my brews, just because I really hate flooding out, and having that cycling land can really help you when that situation is going on. And then we got 7 mountains and 4 rugged highlands. One other thing that I have thought about for this brew is going more towards the artifact lands and maybe even getting rid of most of the removal and just running a couple utility artifacts and running Koldatha Rebirth just to try and again overwhelm our opponents with more creatures. I haven't really committed to that plan, so as of right now, just going with some standard good lands like rugged highlands. Gain lands are always pretty good. Give you a couple extra points of life, can sometimes make the difference in certain matchups. And then in our sideboard, got two copies of Tormod's Crypt. I'm running the crypts here instead of relics since we are in a 17 land build and we don't necessarily always are going to have the resources for something like a relic of progenitus, especially when we want to spend most of our resources on our creatures. And then four copies of Red Elemental Blast. Blue decks are gonna, I think, gonna be pretty hard for this deck, especially if they are on the play, since they will be able to then counter all of our creatures, bounce our creatures before we can really get any damage through. So yeah, Red Elemental Blast seems like a very good card for the deck, and got two copies of Castle and Fire. This has a lot of versatility, so definitely want to bring this in against Affinity or Fairies. And then one copy of Flaring Pain to get around with any cards that grant protection or that can prevent damage in any sort of way. Also, kind of want to find a way to bring in maybe one more, as is something like prismatic strands can really stall us out from what we're trying to do. And then three copies of Weather the Storm, since we can get a pretty high storm count with this deck, especially with things like a Burning Tree, Emissary, and Mana Morpho. So storm count can definitely get very high. So bringing in Weather the Storm against things like Kolatha Red or Burn is definitely a must. And then we're also running three copies of Sprouting Renewal, which this also has a lot of versatility for the deck, as well as we can use it to blow up artifacts or enchantments, which there's a bunch of those in the format that we're going to want to blow up, as well as we could also use it to make another creature, which just helps further our plan with our Goblin Bushwhackers or our Violent Outbursts. And we can probably cast this for no mana as well, because we will have probably on at least 2 to 3 creatures on the board when by the time so we could easily cast this turn 2 for maybe 1 mana, or later in the game for no mana as well. So seems like a pretty decent include in the deck. And that's the list, guys. So definitely I will be leaving a link to it down in the description. But I would also like to hear from you guys and what you think. Well, one, what you think about the list and any changes you would make, or other cards you might want to include in the sideboard and the main deck that you think would add a lot to it. Also, is this card something you're thinking of brewing with now that it has dropped in price, or do you think it is not worth the time at all? Definitely would like to hear your thoughts on it. As always, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.